da 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 da. Ow. Okay, that's how paper cuts happen. Oh my god, hey, welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. My name is Mickey Joe and I'm obsessed with all things theatre. I am a theatre fan, pundit, content creator and critic here on social media, and this is my theatre-themed YouTube channel where I review the shows I have been invited to go and see. And today we're going to be talking about one of the most recent openings here in London, the musical version of Cruel Intentions. This has just recently opened at the Other Palace Theatre in London. It is obviously based on the 90s film of the same name, and I'm going to tell you all about it today. So obviously I was going for Cruel Intentions with the ensemble here, but I feel like we've landed somewhere between The Matrix and I Want to Watch the World Burn, I've Got the Gasoline. That's too much. I can't be dealing with these. So like I said, today we will be reviewing Cruel Intentions, the 90s musical, as it is billed. I'm going to let you know what I thought of the cast, what I thought about the songs. It's a jukebox musical using the hits of the 90s. If you didn't know, now you know. And I want to talk a little bit about how this show has evolved, because I have seen this before. I saw this back in 2019 at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, but I'm particularly excited to bring you my thoughts on this one because the reviews for this have been kind of all over the place. People have given it 2-star reviews, people have given it 5-star reviews, and there are dual conversations happening about the show's material and entertainment value and, you know, just overall strength as a piece of musical theatre, and its actual themes and content and plot. And it may not surprise you to know that I have strong opinions about this, and we're going to get to them later today. Now, if you enjoy today's video, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. There will be many more reviews and exciting news coming very soon. Make sure you're subscribed. You can also go find me on other social media platforms. I am on Instagram, TikTok, the app formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn for business inquiries. And I bring you theatre-themed goodness all over the internet. Finally, if you have already seen Cruel Intentions, or if you have seen one of its previous iterations, this has had a life before, like I said, at the Edinburgh Fringe, prior to that in the US, comment with your thoughts down below. What do you think of Cruel Intentions, and was it a good idea to turn it into a musical? Today, we're going to find out. Stay tuned. So I called this a 90s film. I was just about correct, because on reflection, this was a 1999 film starring Sarah Michelle Gellar, Ryan Phillippe, Selma Blair and Reese Witherspoon, which recontextualized the 18th century novel Les Liaisons Dangereuses, which was itself subsequently adapted for an 80s play and a film adaptation, Dangerous Liaisons, to a wealthy Upper East Side, I believe, American high school, where we meet the selfish, scheming, hedonistic step-siblings Catherine Mertoy and Sebastian Valmont. With a new school year about to start, Catherine is approached to help guide a young, naive new student named Cecile. Meanwhile, Sebastian finds himself desperately trying to seduce a deliberately virginal girl named Annette, who has decided to wait until she is either in love or married to consummate any kind of a relationship. Spurned by her ex-boyfriend, Catherine engages Sebastian in a wager about whether or not he can successfully sleep with Annette. This turns into a dangerous sexual game that also implicates Cecile and her music tutor, who has romantic feelings for her, as well as one of Sebastian's friends and the closeted gay football player that he's been having a relationship with, those being our principal cast of characters, all of whom get embroiled in this scheme. Now, if this all sounds a little bit salacious, it's because it absolutely is. The musical, much like the film and the novel before it, are all quite scandalous and sexy and raunchy, but also, like I mentioned before, deeply hedonistic and selfish, a concept which people who have seen the film will probably be more open to than those who have not previously experienced this source material, who may be a little taken aback, maybe even a little bit scandalized. The way that this works as a musical is it has been scored with a back catalogue of all of your favourite hits from the 90s and early 2000s, featuring such hits as Genie in a Bottle, Just a Girl, No Scrubs, Bye 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 by NSYNC, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Losing My Religion, and of course, Bittersweet Symphony. Da, 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 da. The result of which is a lot of camp entertainment value and humour, much like in And Juliet. Whenever one of these songs starts, there is a audible reaction from the audience, whether that's a laugh, whether that's just an immense satisfaction. But it does tonally leave the musical feeling somewhere between a sincere take on the material and a parody not unlike a Titanic. All of which begs the question, how well does that actually work? So I will preface this by saying that I had a really great time. I had a glass of wine before the show and I had a second one in the interval, and I do think that that's probably the optimal way to enjoy this piece of theatre if you're someone who drinks and is legally allowed to. Because there is an immense entertainment value to this. Like I said, these are great songs, these are fun songs to listen to, especially if this is music from your generation. The way that they have used them is whimsical and campy and tongue-in-cheek. When you have Cecile's very stern mother singing No Scrubs to the young man who is, trying to forge a relationship with her. When you have a gay romantic encounter that ends with the two of them dramatically singing bye 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 to each other. Just about all of these songs have some kind of sexual undertone to begin with, and those that don't are reconceived with new sexual overtones in a way that is very funny. I will explain more about what I mean by that later on. But much like a Titanic, this is just a satisfying watch. It's fun, it's raunchy, it's depraved in many ways, but I'm not going to make any secret of the fact that I had a really good time at this show. That being said, I think the whole thing doesn't quite situate itself exactly where it should tonally, because like I said, it falls somewhere between sincerity and sincerely adapting this story in terms of the book, in terms of the performances, in terms of the direction by Gary Lloyd. We're doing something not unlike a Legally Blonde or a Heathers or a Mean Girls in just trying to put this teen movie onto the stage and just kind of relating its plot that way. But its relationship to its songs and some of the characterizations and occasional moments is so campy, is so funny, that it starts to feel more like the Cruel Intentions parody musical, right? But the tonal barometer is constantly flittering between these two and it never knows quite where to sit. If the whole show were to lean more into its campy moments and take itself a little less seriously, I think the whole thing would be more fun, because that is where it's going to be successful. You cannot separate it from its silliness because it features these songs. And there are moments like with Cecile's mother, Mrs. Caldwell, who is played by Jess Buckby, absolutely understands the assignment in terms of delivering high camp. That is what she is doing with both of the characters that she plays in this show. But the thing about Titanic, which is kind of the gold standard of this type of like tongue-in-cheek campy parody musical, is it's not sincerely adapting Titanic as a film whatsoever. So the songs and all of the humour around them in Cruel Intentions are kind of tonally at odds with the book, which is just kind of doing a faithful adaptation and has no idea that it's meant to be funny. Which brings us to the themes of the whole thing. Now, I am consistently surprised when people will go to certain musicals and be utterly scandalized by them and say, I just couldn't support this, I couldn't enjoy this because the characters weren't likable. And true enough, there is scarcely a likable character on this stage. You begin to root for Sebastian towards the end when he is just expressing sincere and genuine love, but it's also difficult to reconcile that with his behaviour from earlier in the show, where he is deceiving and taking advantage of these young girls, and there's a lot of sexual coercion at play. The whole thing is pretty morally bleak, honestly, but the thing is, it also doesn't claim to be a fable. Like, this is late 90s trashy fun that knows what it is. The only issue being the audience members who arrive having no idea. But I've read reviews of shows like Dogfight, and increasingly a lot of dialogue around Dear Evan Hansen, where people take a moral objection to the show. And then I think of shows like Les Mis or Phantom or Sweeney Todd, where we see legitimately, like, morally, if not dubious, then completely criminal behaviour at play, and certainly in a vast number of dramatic works beyond the world of musical theatre. I don't know that your enjoyment of something has to be conditional on liking the characters that you see on stage. I don't personally feel as though enjoying something that is being depicted makes you complicit in it. However, and this is the point that's going to draw all of this together, do you not think that people might be a little less scarred, scandalised, however they react with shock to this slightly abrasive plot, if it were taken a little less seriously, if it were a silly, campy parody, if they were playing up their roles even more, if Catherine was even more dramatic and Sebastian was even more ridiculous in his seductions and Annette was so obnoxiously virginal and Cecile is most of the way there already, I'll be completely honest. But if it were less sincere, I think people may find it a little less wounding. It's almost like in a pantomime where people will endorse villainy if it's so over the top and ridiculously dramatic. I also don't think you'd lose much by doing that, because it's not like the show is putting anything particularly genuine across, like there's any kind of powerful message that comes of all of it, because it just does feel a little bit futile and pointless, this narrative. So that is my wish for this material, and whether that's to do with reworking the book, whether that's to do with having a director with a different vision for the piece, I don't know, but hopefully that goes some of the way towards explaining my 3-star review. Now let me tell you about the performances. So it's fitting that she's an alumnus of Six the Musical, because Rhianne Louise Mikulski, who plays Catherine Murtoy, is just doing queen behaviour in this show. She's absolutely glorious in this. And she is dominating and seductive and selfish and objectively awful as a person, but there's something delicious to it as well. She exudes this power and authority throughout the thing. We get the occasional moment where we get to see the public persona that she's crafted, but for the most part, we only actually see her in conversation with Sebastian, at which point the mask slips and we see the monster behind it all. I think it would be interesting to see a little more of the person that she pretends to be, or in the moments with Cecile, I think that could be played up even more, so she's being even more like popular and pristine and nice, so that we get more of a duality with the wickedness that lingers behind that facade. But hers is probably the strongest performance in this cast. Her performances of some of these songs, Genie in a Bottle and I'm Only Happy When It Rains, the vocal panache and the power that she brings to that. Alongside her as her stepbrother Sebastian, we have Daniel Bravo. This is a very confident performance from him. He feels quite like an interesting rising star in the industry. His sarcasm and apathy and disinterest are played so brilliantly throughout, and then his growing frustrations as he doesn't seem to be able to get anywhere with Annette, equally fun to watch, as he melts into this genuine warmth and love, perhaps, that he doesn't quite know how to recognize. Again, I think it would be good to see even more of a pronounced shift there, and more of a change, whether that's in his physicality, whether it's his interactions with other characters, how that sort of shapes and changes him as a person because of that encounter and because of that relationship. I think across the entirety of this company, they all do the like steely-eyed, pouty thing very, very well, but there's just another layer of depth that could be explored if we're going to do something sincere with this material. If it does what I want it to do and they just play up the camp, then you just go over the top and ridiculous with whatever the persona is. Next up, we have my friend Abby Budden making her professional stage debut playing Annette. Annette being the headmaster's religious daughter who Sebastian is determined to conquer. Now, as I mentioned, Abby is a friend of mine in real life. You may know her from social media and TikTok, and I was very proud of the performance that she gave in this show. The dancing in the opening, very strong. The vocals, very strong. But in particular, I'm watching her and thinking she's a really genuinely very striking, dramatic actress. And I would be really intrigued to see what she did in like plays hereafter. But also in the musical theatre world, she could very easily have been like a Heather McNamara in Heathers. I enjoyed her interpretation of Annette. It felt like a real person rather than a caricature. And again, we get this shift into a slightly different demeanour in the second act because she's initially very opposed to Sebastian's affections and seductive attempts because she's heard about him already. She's been warned about his reputation and his behaviour, so she's going to have none of it. She is laden with a couple of bafflingly bizarre moments in this script because she's staying with his aunt and he surprises her at her aunt's house and he's been like following her around and she's exhausted by his behaviour, so she's being predictably sassy and sarcastic in response, and she wants nothing to do with him, and Abby is characterising it in that way because that's what it suggests in the script. But then there's this one little ridiculous exchange where he gives her a backpack and she suddenly melts inexplicably quickly for the one character in this plot who is meant to have some kind of a spine and a sense of moral integrity, but she just immediately turns to Jelly and says, "Oh, you didn't have to do that." And that moment felt weirdly out of character to me, but then I think that is probably more of a script problem than an interpretation problem. We have some wonderful scenes between Josh Barnett and Barney Wilkinson, Josh playing a gay character named Blaine and Barney playing a closeted gay character named Greg. The two of them hook up fairly early in the first act, and they've added a song here because the show originally was created for American audiences, and so they've added in a number that is going to land with a particular punch with British audiences, and they sing Spice Girls, specifically Wannabe, with a couple of tweaked lyrics. It's a great moment, it's a crowd-pleasing moment, but another one that feels like campy parody because there's nothing particularly like steamy or legitimate to the encounter that they seem to be having. It's played entirely for laughs and not for any kind of like legitimate passion or anything. I don't begin to believe this relationship between the two of them, but in this version of the show that doesn't really matter. And I also want to mention Rose Galbraith as Cecile, who had a very tough act to follow here because Evelyn Hoskins played this role at the Edinburgh Fringe, amongst a starry cast, by the way, that included Dominic Anderson and Sophie Isaacs and Dean John Wilson and Scott Hunter. But Evelyn in particular gave such a brilliant performance as Cecile that I wasn't sure how anyone else would compare, but Rose Galbraith does a really fantastic job in this role of making it compellingly funny and ridiculous. She is also giving you campy, over-the-top nonsense, which I enjoy. Like, she's clearly deeply naive, more than a little bit foolish, and completely hormonal and desperate for male attention throughout, but she's also playing it very young, which I think is important. Sebastian's actions then feel all the more shocking, as they should. Even her practicing kissing with Catherine while they sing "Kiss Me," because Rianne is playing Catherine as so beyond her years and sophisticated, and Rose is playing Cecile as so immature and unknowing. You really get a sense of this wisdom imbalance between them, and so that really works. And then after she's encountered Sebastian and how she's sort of sexually liberated, but in a way she doesn't really know what to do with, she's just still like really eager. It's very funny. Now, there's a moment from this show that I've been thinking about ever since I saw it at the Edinburgh Fringe, and unless I'm misremembering it, it's been tweaked slightly here, because Sebastian gives Cecile a kiss somewhere other than her mouth, which is the most PG way that I can say that on here because it's important to what I'm about to tell you. But while that's happening and she's kind of sitting atop his shoulders in what we're going to call a piggyback but backwards, she used to be a little bit flustered and then she would sing the song "I Saw the Sign," which, if you think about the lyrics, very funny to use that in this moment. I think that's how it happened at the Edinburgh Fringe, because in this version the two moments have been separated. Like, you have that sexual encounter between the two of them, which is implied but not shown, and then in the second act, when Catherine asks her about it, she then recalls it by singing "I Saw the Sign." In my head, perhaps I'm conflating them and they didn't really happen together, but even if they didn't, I think my version's funnier. When we hear the song this time, it's still funny, it still gets a big reaction out of the audience, but I think, like almost everything else in this production, it could be dialed up even more. So a couple more thoughts about this version of the show. It has further developed since the Edinburgh Fringe in terms of costuming, in terms of having an ensemble. I am slightly concerned about the size of the ensemble and the implication that the four of them must cover two principal parts each, and there don't seem to be swings attached to the show. Perhaps there are, and I just don't know about them. I like the staging. They make decent uses of the balcony. It's really not very unlike Heathers, Gary Lloyd having been attached to the creative team of Heathers as well. I like the choreography. I find it compelling and youthful, and there's a bit of a 90s flavour to it. There's a revolve in the middle of the stage that is used to decent effect. I do think some of the costuming looks a little bit cheap, and it's familiar of the film, and they've recreated exactly some of the outfits from the film. They've also recreated some of the lack of outfits from the film. There is a moment of nudity from behind. I mostly just want them to buy Rihanna more expensive corsets. That's really all I want here. But I think the show is structured well, and going from a one-act version to a two, it didn't feel like it was bloated or overstaying its welcome. Like I said, I had a good time. The only other thing that I have an issue with is how they depict the ending. Now, they pass out these. I'm not going to tell you all of the plot that has gone before this, but it was an iconic moment in the film, and it can be a very hard-hitting moment in the theatre. I just think it needs to be played a little bit differently, because we have Rianne as Catherine making this emotional speech, but it's all very duplicitous. And we begin to see the cracks in this as these pieces of paper get handed out to the audience. If you know the plot, you understand why. Only the trouble is we have her delivering this speech with a very sort of rehearsed emotion, and then as soon as these are brought out, we have ensemble members explaining from the sides. They pass them into the audience from the sides of the stage what they are and saying, wow, this is that, oh, this means that. And I think that undercuts it a little bit. I think if they were to be passed out silently, we would understand from Catherine's reaction, where she's like, what's this, what's happening, that something was going a little bit awry. And then if you get past it, obviously you can see it for yourself. But then if Cecile were to go and pass her one, and then we see her utterly gasp, and then thereafter, I think if you were to have someone explain, or even if we saw Annette then holding a certain prop, it would explain everything. I'm trying not to do spoilers here. I did think in this moment it's a shame they can't have them raining down from above, and then they literally did. So I'm glad that they did that paper drop moment, and there are plenty for you to collect if you hang about in the auditorium afterwards. But I think the initial delivery of that moment with the music coming in, with Bittersweet Symphony, could be more powerful. I don't think we need to explain what's going on straight away. The audience will get it. Who do I think should go and see this show? Because I think it's going to feel like it appeals to the Heathers crowd, and to a subsection of those I would say, yes, there is for sure content warnings, and like I said, there is a moment of like implied nudity from behind. It's not technically full nudity, but it's pretty close. We also don't literally see sex acts being performed, but they are implied, and the whole thing is about sex. This entire plot hinges on it and makes reference to it constantly. But I think for sure the people who were young Heathers fans at the beginning of Heathers, who are now turning into young adults, I don't know the official age warning on this show, and like parents will feel differently and individuals will feel differently, but it's definitely more young adult than teen. Do we say 16 plus? I guess if you're legally old enough to have sex, you can go watch a musical about it. But it does feel like a slightly more grown-up version of Heathers, with some of the darker themes that Heathers kind of occasionally brushed on in that show. I will also say, though, it's tonally very different to the more vibrant and fun and light and bubblegummy and Juliet. It has the same kind of relationship to its music. If you like going to and Juliet for the songs and they make you laugh and you like reliving that 90s fun, if you enjoy going to Pop World, honestly, then go see Cruel Intentions, because you'll get the same kind of kick out of it. If you know the film, if you like the film, go see Cruel Intentions. It doesn't feel like the same kind of sincere adaptation. It feels somewhere close to parody without actually trying to be necessarily. And like I said, if you're someone who drinks wine, consider a large glass before the show. I think it can only improve your evening. But those have been my thoughts about Cruel Intentions, the 90s musical currently playing at the Other Palace Theatre in London. Like I said, if you have seen the show, comment with all of your thoughts down below. I'm very intrigued to hear what other people think about this one, whether we think the morality of it really matters to enjoying yourself at the theatre, whether you think it would be better if it had original songs, or whether it was just like more of a campy parody, which is what I think. Let's discuss. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope that you have enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel for many more exciting reviews coming very soon. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey. Thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!